Jesus never existed.
Actually, that's a flat-out lie. We have a lot of evidence to confirm the existence of a man named Yeshua, who we now know as Jesus.
All right, let's see it.
So there's a little bit of a backstory. Romans at the time were pagan, and so they sacrificed to their gods for the good of the empire and the emperor. If you didn't do this, you were considered a traitor to the Romans, and you were executed. Now, this meant that the Jews who didn't do this as part of their practices, they had their own religious practices, were pretty much always tried and executed as traitors. This led to a Jewish uprising and a long drawn-out conflict between the Romans and the Jews. Ultimately, it did end in peace, with the Romans recognizing the Jews as part of their state. But the Jews had to pay taxes to benefit the empire and to be part of the empire. So when the Roman census came around, the Romans would go to the Jewish elders with a list of people that had not been sacrificing for the good of the empire and ask them, are these people of your church? If the Jewish elders said yes, then they said, perfect, have they been paying their taxes? Yes, these people were allowed to live. However, if the Jewish elders said, no, they're not part of our church, or no, they haven't been paying taxes, then these people were in trouble with the empire and usually were executed as traitors. Which brings us back to Yeshua. So Yeshua was teaching a new form of Judaism, and he really pissed off the Jewish elders. So when the Roman census came around, they denounced him. They said, no, he's not part of our church, and no, he has not been sacrificing for the good of your empire. So the Romans arrested him and tried him as a traitor and executed him, along with every single other person that was found to be a traitor at that time.
So the only claim in that clip that is actually supported by ancient data is the claim that Rome imposed a unique tax upon Jewish communities so that they could remain in good standing with the empire without being forced to offer sacrifice to the emperor, and that tax was known as the Fiscus Judaicus. The problem with associating that tax with the death of Jesus is that it was first imposed almost 40 years after Jesus' death by the Emperor Vespasian following the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem near the end of the Jewish War. So it played absolutely no role whatsoever in Jesus' death. Now, this creator is going to acknowledge as much in a follow-up video responding to a comment asking for sources. And they're going to say they looked in the Encyclopedia Britannica and they were reminded that the chronology doesn't line up there, so they apologize for that error. And I commend this creator for having the maturity and the discipline to be able to do that. However, they go on to say Jesus was still denounced by the Jewish elders to Rome and was executed as a traitor. Now, this is not supported by any Roman sources from this time period. This is really just a characterization of the account from the Gospels. The notion that we have firm documentation in Roman sources of this is not supported by any data. We don't get any Roman documentation until the 2nd century CE, where the documentation is really just talking about the existence of Christians and kind of vaguely referring back to Jesus having been executed. So this creator's initial claim that we have good confirmation of Jesus' execution and the reasons for it is not really supported by the data. I think the most responsible approach to the evidence we have for the life of Jesus would be to say that it is more likely than not that a historical figure named Jesus, who was an apocalyptic preacher, was executed by Rome existed. To say that we can be absolutely certain or that there is firm documentation or anything like that, I would argue goes a bit beyond the data. But to say also that it was entirely invented and that that is probable or more likely than the existence of a historical Jesus, I would also say goes well beyond the data that we have.
To the Romans, Yeshua was just another traitor to the empire that really didn't cause them much concern at all. It really wasn't until followers of Yeshua, particularly guys like St. Peter, started causing issues for the Romans that the Romans took notice of this new religion, of this early Christianity. In fact, it wasn't really until St. Peter was executed for his crimes that they went, wait, Yeshua was important? Huh. We had no idea.
The earliest references of any kind that we have to Christianity from Roman sources come from the early 2nd century CE. So I don't think we have anything that supports a confident reconstruction of the perspective of the Roman Empire regarding Christianity in the 1st century CE.
So if Yeshua was his name, where the hell do we get Jesus from?
So the New Testament, which was originally composed in Greek, adopted an already existing transliteration of the Aramaic name Yeshua as Jesus, and that gets transliterated into Latin as Jesus, which gets transliterated into English, initially as Jesus, but the English language further develops and changes, and so does the pronunciation of this name. So today we have Jesus, or for many evangelical folks who want to make sure that they honor every syllable of the name, Jesus.
Well, when early Christianity made its way to Greece, the Greeks couldn't actually say Yeshua, Yeshua being Hebrew. So the Greeks had their own way of saying it, which was Jesus, which is where we get Jesus from.
The Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, was already using that transliteration into Greek of the Aramaic name Yeshu in the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. So that transliteration into Greek was already well established before Jesus was even born.